On November 29, 2009, the last Imam of Oman, Ghalib al-Hinai, died, bringing a 1,000-year-plus tradition to an end. But where did it all start? And more relevant to today's world, what caused the end of this tradition? To avoid overcomplication, since this topic ranges from such a wide span of time, we will focus on the rise to the fall of the 8th incarnation of the Imamate of Oman, lasting from 1913 to 1959, with a specific analysis on the economics of this polity. But first, let's take a step back and discuss the circumstances which led to its development. The vast majority of Omanis are Muslim, specifically following the branch of Ibadi Islam. In the 8th century, the first Ibadi imamate, located in the interior of modern Oman, was declared. Fast forward a bit through an empire encompassing much of the coast of East Africa, the replacement of an Omani imam with a sultan, and a British protectorate declared over Oman, and we arrive at the beginning of the 20th century. The current Sultan of Oman, Faisal, has already experienced a major rebellion against his rule in the 1890s and is very unpopular with the Omanis in the interior of the country, who are traditionally more conservative Ibadis. Sultan Faisal is largely seen as a puppet of British rule, who has spat on Islam by forcing blatant violation of Islamic code, like failing to apply Sharia law in civil cases, allowing alcohol and cigarettes, and suppressing the slave and arms trade, which at the time was very popular with Omanis in the interior. The economy on the coast had also been in ruin since the 1860s, which had previously been one of the most important Gulf states as a result, in part, of exporting high-quality horses. By 1913, the Omanis in the interior had had enough, after a severe limitation on the arms trade the year prior, and took up in a rebellion, creating a polity under an imam, with its capital in Naswa, and adhering to Sharia law. The rebellion lasted until 1920, when it was agreed to give the imam's territories autonomy in the Treaty of Sib. The polity continued to exist as a relatively unknown and isolated entity until a war with the Sultan in the 1950s. With pro-imamate insurgents being finally removed by 1962. Then the question arises, if this was such an unknown and isolated state, how effective was this economic system? And to answer it, although it was a historically popular system, it was one that could not survive in the climate of the 20th century. But why was this? Well, to start, the policy was not at all aided by the geographic location of the imamate. During the rebellion in the 1910s, the imamate attempted to seek the aid of Yemen, the Ottoman Empire, and Germany, though its location in the middle of the desert and British control over the ports meant that supplies could not be delivered to aid the rebels. This culminated in the collapse of fuel for the rebellion after the failed attack on Muscat in January 1915, with most resources being spent and no major gains being made for the rest of the war. The currency of the imamate was the outdated and inflated Maria Theresa thaler, of which the government could not produce more of, meaning that they could not control the worth of it. The expenditures used by the government to support large-scale projects also exceeded the revenue that it was making through the Bayat al-Mal, even though it was taking in every new village that was captured, and taxes were levied on products such as animals, food, and minerals. The self-sufficient nature of the economy and lack of trade with any other outside countries meant that the Spanish flu epidemic, which came to Oman in 1918, ravaged the country and resulted in economic decay and the deaths of about 20,000 Omanis, which was 7% of the population at the time. After the Treaty of Sib in 1920, the intentional ambiguity on the status of the country left the Sultanate controlling the coastal regions, and an imamate controlling the desert and mountainous regions of the interior, which left the conservatives happy. The imam was assassinated in July 1920 and was succeeded by Muhammad al-Khalili, who turned the country into a hermit kingdom, seeing Western technologies as degenerate and closing it off to all Westerners besides doctors. This policy was a largely ideological one that could not work in a world where all of its neighbors developed rapidly ahead of it. This self-sufficiency left the economy of the Sharqiya region in ruin after it had been pummeled by severe droughts. As oil was being discovered on the Arabian sands, the Sultan and the British government patiently waited for the death of Imam Muhammad, now set their eyes on the interior, whose autarkic policy meant that they themselves had no way of extracting and profiting off of the rich oil reserve. When Muhammad finally died in May 1954, he was replaced by Imam Ghalib al-Hinai, who, alongside his brother Talib, had attempted to establish ties with the outside world for the first time, though it was too late. The Sultan and British embarked on a campaign to end the control of the interior by Imamate forces, and succeeded in it. Imam Ghalib attempted to seek the support of the United Nations and the Arab League against the invasion by the Sultan and the British, though due to the previous policy of the country being completely isolated, they found no allies to their cause. What this proves was the economic policy of Salim al-Harusi and Muhammad al-Khalili was to become a complete failure and only lead to lagging behind in technology and destruction of their state. A country needs to let go of their fervor and be pragmatic, lest they be left in the sands of time.